everyone. We are going to talk about what occurred in Western Europe between the High to Late Middle Ages. The Late Middle Ages was a time where kings created separate nations, and we're going to focus on the four that you see on this screen here today. Time-wise, we've already covered the early Middle Ages, where kings selected vassals, and each vassal had their own manor estate, and there was a feudal government in response to the invasion that was occurring. Now we're going to talk about the High to Late Middle Ages, where we go from separate manor estates to nations. The first nation that we're going to talk about is England. England was invaded by the Angles and Saxons, two Germanic tribes, and the Angles and Saxons were united together by King Alfred the Great. His descendant, Edward the Confessor, ends up having no heir, and the throne is called into question in England. There's many different contenders. The top two are Harold Godwinson, who's an Anglo-Saxon prince and Edward's brother-in-law, who faces off William, who is the Duke of Normandy in France, Edward's cousin. William decides to cross the English Channel and invade England for his throne. This event is called the Norman Conquest. Harold and William face off each other at the Battle of Hastings, and William wins, becoming the conqueror. He unites England together and then proceeds, after becoming king, to divide England into fiefs for his loyal knights. William's grandson, Henry II, knows that England cannot follow ordeals and weregild and customs forever, so he creates common law. This is the idea that the law is the same everywhere in England, and that the law is upheld in royal courts. Henry's son John actually goes against this idea and tries to give the kingship more power. The nobles put a stop to that and forced John to sign a very important document called the Magna Carta. This guaranteed the rights of the nobles and limited the rights of the king. It also created England's first English parliament, giving the nobles representation in government. The second kingdom that we're going to talk about is France. We know that France was invaded by the Franks, and Charlemagne united the Franks and several other areas in Europe together under the Carolingian Empire. When Charlemagne dies, his empire is invaded and manor estates are established. The heads of these manors are French nobles. The French nobles end up electing one of their own, a person called Hugh Capet, to be king of the Franks, to rule over all of the manor estates in France. But there is still a large part of France that is controlled by England. This contested area ends up leading to an event called the 100 Years' War. So the 100 Years' War will determine who will be the strongest nation in Europe. It was fought between England and France between 1337 and 1453. Early on, the English were actually doing quite well due to the longbow, and the French were losing. But Joan of Arc comes to the scene. She is a teenager on a mission from God to save France. She has visions, and she actually leads the army to victory at Orleans in 1429. As you can see in the map, France ends up gaining back all the territory that they didn't have before. The third nation that we're going to talk about briefly is Spain. So Spain was, after the fall of the Roman Empire, conquered by the Visigoths. After a while, in the 700s, as we can see in the map here, Spain is invaded by the Umayyad Empire, or the Islamic Empire. And for 700 years, Muslims ruled Spain. Now, as they ruled Spain, they were also in conflict with Christian kingdoms that fought the Muslims during an event called the Reconquista, to reclaim Spain. The Reconquista was completed in 1492 by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, who defeated the last Muslim ruler and expelled non-Christians from Spain in an effort to unify Spain as a Christian nation. They also were the same people to authorize Columbus to claim land in the Western Hemisphere. The final kingdom that we're going to talk about is Russia. So early on, the Slavic peoples settled in Eastern Europe and were eventually united by Vikings, who they claimed as their king. Um, the Vikings then went on to create a territory which they ruled called Kievan Rus. Now, Kievan Rus was made up of multiple Russian principalities, and in the 1200s, as we know, they were conquered by the Mongol Empire, being incorporated into the Golden Horde, shown here. Eventually in 1480, Ivan the Great manages to drive out the Mongols, giving himself a new title, Tsar. He manages to bring all of the power together under the Tsar and establishes his capital city in Moscow up here, expanding the Russian kingdom. Remember, Russia has strong political, economic, and cultural connections with the Byzantines down here, as can be seen in St. Basil's Cathedral. All right, that's it for today's video notes. Remember, the words that are highlighted in blue are important vocabulary terms, and I'll see everyone in class.